if you're involved in this team, then you need to be on these calls. And that's absolutely true. If you are involved in this team, then you need to be on these calls. But the calls are not, what was the phrase? Checking up or interrogation. That they are intended, like everything else we do, to support each in being the best they can be. But being the best they can be as part of a collective, as opposed to just being an individual.
Well, remember that those sort of groups will automatically throw up people's fears. And if they've got a fear of authority or a fear of being dominated, that will bubble to the surface. It's not necessarily personally intended at all. Their stuff. You just happen to be the mirror.
Yes. And I think also that the phrase mirror is pertinent because this, in this case, PSG, you head up, so you're holding the mirror and you've been doing this for a long time. And that means it's a pretty good mirror. And the reality is that when you look in a pretty good mirror, you see things as they are. And if you've managed to avoid looking in the mirror for quite a long time, then you know at a subtle level that when you look in that mirror, you're going to see things that you've been avoiding looking at for a long time. And the bottom line is that we need all of our team members to do that. Because if we don't, then eventually we can't rely on that team member. Now we've done this amongst ourselves for a while, and we're now getting to the point, Ash, where you've probably been well, you and Judy have been on all the calls. So you've been on as many calls as anyone, and you've seen how this has grown over the last year. And effectively it's been a year of trial. It's only now that we've come to the point where they are working or they're structured now to work as Judy intended. And it begins now, really. If anyone's watching this who hasn't been involved in a PSG call yet, the structure is a video call that is driven by Ash. He handles the technology, whereas the content of the call is directed by Judy. So they have become a double act.
Punch and Judy.
Ola, what's been your experience of the PSG calls this year? Because you've done several.
What Ash mentioned, I noticed people not being certain, including myself, if we should speak about our everyday experience, our private life, and what we are going through, or are we going to put it in the context of yoga and us being teachers? I was asked in Poland this question also. Why are we doing this? And should I also get in? Can I, being a teacher, or should I be a teacher? Somehow, maybe we have just started working with iSky. That's why. So this, I think there's a little, some confusion. During the last call as well, there was someone, a woman, sorry I don't remember her name, mentioning this. What should I be talking about? She asked this direct question.
Well, this is interesting, you see, because in my discipline that would be called part of a be good message. I've got to be good as a yoga teacher, or I've got to be good as a partner, or whatever it is. These are called, in my discipline, these are called self-drivers, and there are loads of them. But that's one of them, and it links very much to the heart. What we're inclined to do is we fragment our lives and say, this is my home life, this is my work life, this is who I am when I travel, etc. Well, actually, it's all us. We're playing different roles, but we are the central character. And so we should be able to describe whatever role we're playing. If you take it round zodiac, you've got 12 circles of the sections of the zodiac. 13 is known as an unlucky number because it's the time you go into the centre of your being, and if you've gone in too soon, it'll just spit you out round the wheel again. If you've gone in at the right time, you will be able to hold your space and just be you, regardless of the role you're playing. So what we're trying to do in PSG is give people a platform to talk from wherever they're at. And at the end of it, we'll try and mix it up and make it slightly more easy for them to be who they are. Because you know, when we get intent on improving our spiritual practice, we become a bit of a pain, quite frankly. You know, we're miserable, we're doer, we take it all terribly seriously, and actually then we talk about lightening up. It's a bit of a contradiction, really. So part of the PSG is hopefully you've gone into your super serious bit and now it's time to become a little bit more whole and lighten up. It's a much more convincing message for students, families, or anyone.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was thinking also that because Icekai's grown out of teaching people to instruct yoga, then you have this thing where you start from wherever you are, and your intention over what has been a 200-hour training course is to get to the point where you can hold a standard in front of a class. And so that's been the intention, to be the best you can be for an hour and a half, whatever it is. And that then begins to filter through the rest of your life. So if you're taking the yoga medicine, it is going to change the rest of your life. But if you're making an arbitrary distinction between, oh no, I'm only a vegetarian when I teach the yoga class, and I eat meat for the rest of the day, then that distinction doesn't work. And so at some point you have to start from where you are. If you only ever stay where you are, then you don't get to where your projection to be is. And I think this is exactly the dilemma that you put into a PSG call. How do you separate the things that you do which are the best you can do from the other stuff that you do, which is the habits, the indulgences that you've kept up through your life. And it comes back to, you'll carry on doing all of that stuff just because it's a habit, it's what you do, until someone holds a mirror up to you. And effectively, that's what happens on this planet. We all mirror each other. The clearer the mirror is, the better the image of yourself you see.
We also have to be aware, don't we, of what we put out there to other people. You know, I will never forget, all of us have got children. I will never forget my children saying to me when I lived and worked in a college, "Are you going to work with real people today, Mum?" Because their idea was at that time that people who took meditation courses or exercise courses, they were a bit weird, really. And so I was, you've met my kids, and they're quite normal now, and they kind of accept you as quite normal, but they certainly wouldn't have done a few years ago. And we have to be aware of, if we're going to teach, what we put out and how acceptable we are to our public. Because otherwise we can cause separation. We can live one life as spiritual seeker, teacher, and quite another life as, I don't know, your partner's partner.
And we must do that as we start out. It is a paradox, is that if you're going to become something new, then you go through a transition where you're unsure whether you are the old or whether you're the new. It's the old caterpillar to butterfly idea, is that you have to get into a third space to make the transformation. But it is implicit in that, and I've come across that so many times, is that we, through any of the training process that we facilitate, we encourage people to talk about their experience directly related to the course, but we realise that that experience filters through the rest of their life, so they're going to talk about everything that's happened to them, and that's how it is, because finally that there is no boundary to what we describe as yoga. It is, as you were saying a few minutes ago, yoga is union, and it is the union of the finite, everything that we experience, with the infinite, the totality of everything. So when you're in that, your yoga practice is essentially an attitude. It's not what you do, but the attitude you bring to it. Well, I like the word attitude because it always reminds me of an aeroplane. Is that if your attitude is ascending, then that's what you do. If your attitude is descending, then that's what it does.
Attitude and altitude.
That's the one. If you want your altitude to increase, you have to change your attitude.
Along with several other things.
So would you say you're in a way you're trying to help safeguard that teachers who are out there basically don't get into trouble really by feeling that they're on their own and they have no support and they're doing their own practice on their own and have almost no accountability, so no kind of coaching and no one's really seeing what they're going through and fine-tuning where they're at, because it's so easy, even from my perspective, to have gone out there, be amongst a crowd of people who suddenly know Ash as being a teacher. Oh wow, what a great teacher. But then I'm kind of devising my own little practice, which is fine, but then it's always somebody else looking at me, and a teacher above me, more experienced than me, that will be able to fine-tune and guide that a little bit, especially the areas where I go into where I don't really know where I'm going into. I don't know how I've ended up here. Yes, I've done this meditation, but oh shit, I'm in this emotion now, and this is happening in my life. So is that also, is this a kind of vessel or channel through which little things that, say, as a teacher on my own, I haven't realized is going on?
I think that's exactly it, and the vocabulary used to fine-tune, to guide, to assist is all very much part of an initiative that is preventative, in the sense to help the student teachers to flag up a possible problem area so that they can be assisted and guided through it without it becoming a kind of hit the wall scenario. So, when people are here, it's a relatively intense year with whatever 10 meetings over whatever, 25 days or something. But then, congratulations, you passed the course, there's your piece of paper saying you're a very clever Kundalini yoga teacher. And then in certain respects you are on your own, depending on the kind of nature of the connection you've made with the circle of teachers. And so this is a way of really helping all those who are actively part of the iSky project to remain on track and to grow and to progress within a peer group and with some senior teachers to assist.
And of course we always think that students are going to behave themselves beautifully. We don't think that we're going to meet the ones who are rebellious, sulky, stroppy, miserable, deliberately obstructive. I can remember my teacher saying to me, he said, "You will continue to teach until you know you can cope with all character traits. Then you will be given a choice as to whether you want to continue or not. Until that time, it's compulsory."
Wow.
And you have to have the strength of character and build your character to be able to cope with these. We'll do our meditation practice and that'll be fine on the heavenly levels, but down here on the earth we'll have to build our character enough to be able to manage the less than easy, because they're not going to sit there forever saying, oh, thank you so much for coming. Do you want to add to that?
The, not specific to that, but to broaden that out, because it's and we're talking about PSG in the context of iSky, because it's something that we felt the need to do and to extend and share. But in actual fact, it doesn't have a limitation, so it is a requirement on our team members to participate, but it's open to all. And the PSG is professional supervision, spiritual guidance. That's where the PSG goes from, and whether you're a professional or not, I think you should be behaving ethically in a professional manner, just in your ordinary everyday life. You know, I expect people, driving a car to drive professionally, even if they're not professional drivers. I expect that level of competence. If people are following a path, then or a practice, then they do need to be supervised to realise how effectively that they are following it. We all rush into something.
I think they need to bring to supervision their problems rather than be supervised, because in a way they're supervising themselves by doing the job.
It's true.
But they will run into problems for sure. And then to have the capacity of sharing notes with peers, but also someone much more experienced who has met that 1,000 times before, can be very comforting.
But I think also an element of supervision is also in reflection, is that we don't recognise. I mean, one of the first things that you understand is that if you're going to do anything useful on this planet, be harmless. So start by not making it worse. And we all blithely assume that we're not making it worse, where often we are. And you need that reflection, and that comes in the process of supervision, to actually highlight to you that what you thought was perfectly acceptable behaviour or perfectly acceptable language actually is damaging to someone else or offensive to someone else. And you just don't do that on your own, because we create our own narrative, to use that possible word, in which we appear to be very good. And only when someone holds the mirror up in front of you, you think, oh, not quite as good as I thought I was.
Well, that's why it's good to have peer groups working together, because it's like us. I mean, on occasions we've been quite brutal with each other as to what
Often.
we don't get all pathetic.
Sorry, often you've been brutal, you were saying?
No, I didn't say that at all. I said we have been quite brutal with each other while we have tried to sort out an issue, whether it was for us or one of the others.
Yeah.
And that's been hugely supportive over many, many, many years. And everyone should have that facility, but they don't.
Yeah, that's true. But clarity is brutal, isn't it? You have to say it's not grey, it's black or it's white. And that is brutal. But it doesn't have to be offensive or scary.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, and if you're comfortable enough, as we have been through the years, then you can just do that. Say, we don't even need to do that. In somebody else, you may say, look, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. Whereas when you've practiced this for a while, it's not going to be taken the wrong way.
That's absolutely correct.
And what you're about is getting to the same point. We're using the word clarity now, but it's one of a select group of words that is good because we're all working towards it. No one is offended, no one should be offended by clarity. When we're clear about something, we're all progressing. And I was talking about PSG and how we arrived at those initials, and the S, of course, for spiritual, and G for guidance. I think one of the things that people often react to that, and originally when we introduced this, we only talked about spiritual guidance, and one of the first responses was, I don't need guidance, I don't need spiritual guidance. Where is this coming from? What religion is this? And that's where we extended that into professional supervision, spiritual guidance, and tried to be more inclusive about this, because effectively everyone has the spirit within, everyone has the guidance within, and everyone has difficulty in accessing that with clarity. And you access that as often as not through a process of engagement. I've been talking about the mirror this morning, with a spiritual teacher, with a spiritual practice, or in this case, with a group of peers. And we're doing that within a team context, but I feel that this is probably the most important step that we've taken since we started iSky in the first place, because this opens up a whole new area, because it's not just about training yoga instructors anymore. It's about saying to anyone who wishes to live their life in a more holistic, inclusive way, this is a process you can engage in. This is a way that you can be supported without having to join a specific group, without having to get into a specific religious practice, without identifying we are the good guys, instead identifying that everyone has goodness within them, and that goodness, when manifest, is recognised by all. And that, I know it's looking a long way ahead, but to be at the point where instead of people coming to us for training courses, they're actually attracted to iSky because they want to engage in their own personal process of PSG, that would be a useful contribution, I think.
It's already,
Sorry.
it's already happening. A couple of people have approached me and said, "Oh, do I have to be an intern to do this? Do I have to be part of the team?" And my reply was, "Well, you become part of the team by engaging in PSG." Drop Darryl an email and you can join up. I don't know if they have yet, but it's kind of, that message is getting out there, and some people are picking it up and going, "Oh, this has value. This is good stuff."
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if the response to that should not be you become part of the team, but simply yes.
Well,
So you can engage on your own terms, but you do have to meet the rules of engagement, so to speak.
Yeah.
And of course, as we creep along, if we're seeking greater light for all, we will attract greater darkness. That's the law. And to learn how to walk through that darkness without harming ourselves or anybody else is part of the job.
Yeah.
If we're going to stay whole, which we hope we are, reasonably.
So to summarise, who is PSG spiritual guidance for?
You.
for everybody, but it's it's for all of the extended iSky family, which is a kind of self-identified group.
But we try to slot them into the strata they're on. So the step of the stair they happen to be on at that time doesn't mean to say they won't go up a stair. Of course they will. But right now, where are they going to be comfortable, and who are they going to be comfortable talking with?
Their peers.
It's been the maxim to be inclusive rather than exclusive. But if you can be inclusive at the highest common denominator, as opposed just inclusive, everyone comes in, that doesn't work. But if everyone comes in striving to be the best they can be, then PSG is the best we can offer at the moment. to enable that process, both individually and collectively.
Because the teaching is very much a more masculine way of, I will give you information and you have choice as to whether to use it or not. PSG is much more a feminine way of saying, well, how do you feel about that teaching? And is it all right for you? Let's put those two together and you're going to be much more stable and on your way. So it's a more complete service.
With the new mission statement of right action and right reaction.
Well, very good. Where did you get that from?
I stole it from you.
I'd say that if you are really on the spiritual path, deeper levels of environmental and genetic history, maybe your own, maybe belonging to your environment or your family or your country or whatever, is going to come up through you. So the higher standard comes down and the deeper level of history comes up, which basically means you feel like rubbish. If you process it, you'll get through it okay. If you don't, you'll get sick. No doubt about it. And if you can make that process easier through talking stuff, through therapy stuff, through meditation practice, then it'll relatively go by without you noticing it. If you don't, it'll smack you in the face, basically. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
The question was, name the benefits of PSG.
Yes, if you had to.
And for someone on the spiritual path, I think Judy puts it very well, but to approach it in a slightly different way, it is to start on the spiritual path is easy. To continue on the spiritual path is challenging, and to be aware when you've strayed off the spiritual path is next to impossible. That's when you need something like PSG. There are other ways of doing it, but I'm feeling that those other ways have worked in the past and work less well in the present, and we're trying to find a way that works for this time and place. And PSG collectively, the group moving forward, or supporting each other to move forward. Different analogies come to my mind, but I can't think of any that I'm really happy with. Maybe pebbles on a beach as a wave comes in and out. We're all individual, but we move collectively. Sorry, I've been a little bit woolly on that. I was trying to avoid the military analogy of a soldier making ground, but they can only make ground if there are others. If there's just one, you're gone. If there's a whole bunch of people moving together, you can do it collectively.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think I'd put it this way, that the spiritual path is one in which one will inevitably meet challenges. The challenges that one meets are the challenges of self, challenges within oneself, and that PSG is a very professional initiative to assist and help a person meet the challenge of self and walk that progressive path to expanded consciousness that we're all propagating and teaching. And that would be the value of it from my perspective.
One question I had. I've noticed some schools are quite Kundalini yoga schools. I suppose I'd describe them as purist. It's what Yogi Bhajan said, That's it. Anything outside of that, forget it. You're not allowed to do that. But of course, with iSky, with Judy's presence, with the PSG, it seems that iSky is more open to other traditions. Is that a reflection of how the courses are taught?
Yes.
Including the Kundalini Yoga courses?
Yeah, and it has always been. But that came with a price tag for us, because we've always been clear that Yoga Bhajan is a modern master of Kundalini Yoga, enough said. But Kundalini Yoga did not begin with Yoga Bhajan. So you have to set it in a context of an ancient form of yoga that's been given a modern presentation. And so we've always done that, and although we certify people to instruct Kundalini Yoga as taught by Yoga Bhajan, we set it within the context of this ancient technology. And I think other schools that you refer to would also agree that it's an ancient technology, but they don't set it as broadly. I did a demonstration at the London Yoga Show yesterday, and I was doing what I would call a warm-up, but it was lifted from Osho's dynamic Kundalini meditation. Now that's another contemporary teacher, but it's not as taught by Yoga Bhajan. It's meditation. And although I wasn't doing an inquiry reflection process, if I'd had more time, I probably would have been. And that's Kundalini practice as taught in Sahaja Yoga. Again, another contemporary form. And I was referring to an Edgar Cayce meditation, which he said was ancient Egyptian. But again, it's a Kundalini presentation. And so that's always been our context. We're certifying people to instruct competent Kundalini Yoga as taught by Yogi Bhajan. We're endorsing the structure that Yogi Bhajan devised to deliver a powerful technology in a safe way, but we're setting it within a context that is inclusive. And that's the key thing. We'd never be in a position, we would never allow it to happen that somebody would come along and say, look, I'm a committed Buddhist, Christian, whatever, can I do Kundalini Yoga? Our answer always is yes. We're quite simply, this is an inclusive spiritual technology that doesn't require a belief system.
And so, just adding to that, really kind of affirming what Darryl has said, that Kundalini is a human phenomenon, and consequently has been around as long as human beings have. Yogi Bhajan came over in whatever it was, 1969, so he spent 40 odd years creating a kind of a global grassroots teaching system to kind of bring it out of the relative darkness. But if you look at the informational spectrum that he himself was drawing on, you get sources, named sources, that would include teachings of Muhammad, of Buddha, of Moses, of the ancient Egyptians, of Sarah, of Romani gypsies, of various of the yogis, Mahasiddhas and Sants throughout the ages, and a narrative that included various forays and field trips out to his contemporaries to gather what then became part of Kundalini Yoga as taught by Yogi Bhajan. And given that there's also a kind of an issue around the nature of the relationship between Kundalini Yoga and Sikh Dharma, we should point out, remind ourselves that Sikh Dharma itself began with the birth of Guru Nanak in 1469, which makes it less than 600 years old. And again, Kundalini is a phenomenon that is absolutely timeless. So there's a very interesting kind of sociologically kind of spiritual elision between Kundalini and Sikh Dharma that was then, if you like, recognised and received by Yogi Bhajan, who was a Sikh, but his connection to the yogic practices that are very much part of the Sikh lineage also included the teachings of Guru Nanak's first son, who was more of a Hindu practitioner than a Sikh. He never became a guru, and is kind of renowned among Indian yogidom by the Surichan. So there's always really interesting cross-fertilization, even within what we're calling Kundalini Yoga. If we then add into the picture and add it from a slightly different take on it, then that's what Judy brings to what is already a kind of a sumptuous cultural and spiritual feast. So yes, Yogi Bhajan is a great modern master of Kundalini, but Kundalini is a phenomenon that never was, never is, never will be, if you like, limited to an expression through one human being. And indeed, to his credit, he always taught us to recognise the fact that we're part of a kind of a skein, a network that he always referred to as the golden chain.
The Kundalini is the energy of awareness, and it's the energy of creativity, so it doesn't just belong to yoga. That's what you said earlier. Yoga is the union of everything, so these words chase you round and about. But I think it's interesting that in his practice of Kundalini Yoga, initially Yogi Bhajan did not introduce Sikh Dharma, but he did subsequently. And it effectively set a bunch of rules, guidelines, ethics for personal practice. But they come with what I would say the baggage of a religion. And I think this is worth considering in the context of PSG, because we're trying to again provide those access to those personal standards without the baggage of them being prescribed from outside. And it's a tricky thing to do, but when you set out to be a teacher, then you have authority whether you asked for it or not, and you have responsibility whether you asked for it or not. And you may well not have been trained adequately to recognise or exercise that, and you need to be held to account. You need to hold yourself to account, but if you're not prepared to hold yourself to account, you need to be held to account in some way, either by your belief system or, as we're suggesting, through your peer group. And I think it's interesting that it's taken us some years, and we may have talked about this before, to actually come up with something that we feel is going to work to enable people to do that without being prescriptive. Because it absolutely needs to happen. Because otherwise you just have people going out and doing whatever they want, and that will create harm. What I want is not what everybody else wants. It's a good mantra, isn't it? I want to want what God wants.
I will to will thy will.
That's a popular one.
I do to do thy doing, I be to be thy being.
Once more to camera.